Part 4, Section 27. O Baha'u'llah, what hast thou done? To Lua, the final week of Abdu'l-Baha's visit to America vanished as quickly as a mist from the sun. The joy of those days would soon be over. But what days of victory they had been. Shoghi Effendi has captured the poignant contrast between those times of American triumph and Abdu'l-Baha's early sufferings and persecution. The Master's American followers, for years to come, would radiate the happiness and wonders of the hours he had shared with them. Abdu'l-Baha himself must have been stirred to his depths by the ever-increasing signs of the respect being shown to his father's faith. Who knows what memories stirred within him, Shoghi Effendi writes of his beloved grandfather, as he stood before the thundering waters of Niagara, breathing the free air of a far distant land, or gazed in the course of a brief and much-needed rest upon the green woods and countryside in Glenwood Springs, or moved to a retinue of Oriental believers along the paths of the Trocadero Gardens in Paris, or walked alone in the evening beside the majestic Hudson on Riverside Drive in New York, or has he paced the terrace of the Hotel du Parc on Tonon-les-Bains, overlooking the Lake of Geneva, or as he watched from Serpentine Bridge in London, the pearly chain of lights beneath the trees stretching as far as the eye could see. Memories of the sorrows, the poverty, the overhanging doom of his earlier years. Memories of his mother who sold her gold buttons to provide him, his brother and his sister with sustenance, and who was forced in her darkest hours to place a handful of dry flour in the palm of his hand to appease his hunger. Of his own childhood, when pursued and derided by a mob of ruffians in the streets of Tehran. Of the damp and gloomy room, formerly a morgue, which he occupied in the barracks of Akka, and of his imprisonment in that dungeon of that city. Memories such as these must have surely thronged his mind. Thoughts, too, must have visited him of the Bab's captivity in the mountain fastness of Azerbaijan, when at night time he was refused even a lamp, and his cruel and tragic execution when hundreds of bullets riddled his youthful breast. Above all, his thoughts must have centred on Baha'u'llah, whom he loved so passionately and whose trials he had witnessed and shared from his boyhood. The vermin-infested Siachal of Tehran, the bastinado inflicted upon him in Amul, the humble fare which filled his kashkul while Baha'u'llah lived for 2 years the life of a dervish in the mountains of Kurdistan. The days in Baghdad when he did not even possess a change of linen, and when Baha'u'llah's followers subsisted on a handful of dates. His confinement behind the prison walls of Akka, when for 9 years even the sight of Urdu was denied him, and the public humiliation to which he was subjected at government headquarters in that city. Pictures from the tragic past, such as these, must have many a time overpowered him with feelings of mingled gratitude and sorrow, as he witnessed the many marks of respect, of esteem, and now shown him and the faith which he represented. One evening, as he was being driven to fulfill his third engagement in one day, in the nation's capital at Washington, Abdu'l-Baha was heard to exclaim, O Baha'u'llah, what hast thou done? O Baha'u'llah, may my life be sacrificed for thee. How full were thy days with trials and tribulations, how severe the ordeals thou didst endure, how solid the foundation thou hast finally laid, and how glorious the banner thou didst hoist. Part 4, Section 28, Farewell to America. The morning of 5 December 1912 was the day of yet another parting for Lua and her beloved master. The SS Celtic lay in the New York harbour ready to carry Abdu'l-Baha away from these shores forever. He was saying farewell to all of his American friends. His face was a mosaic of beauty. Suddenly, a hush came over the crowded deck. Newspaper men, photographers, and friends all turned their gaze on that one lone figure. In the silence, all that could be heard was the sound of distant ships, the occasional blast of a tug whistle, the distant rush of a great city, and the cry of the birds. Then the master began to speak. The following eyewitness account of these last minutes aboard the Celtic was written by an American clergyman of Unitarian Church, Howard Colby Ives. So great was the spiritual impact of his meeting with Abdu'l-Baha, so intense was the love which the Master kindled in his heart, that he left his church and dedicated the remaining days of his life to teaching the faith of Baha'u'llah. For the last time in America, Howard Ives later wrote, that wonderful voice resounded across the deck of the SS Celtic. When the Master had finished speaking, Ives recorded, he requested all present to come to him, that he might take their hands in a parting expression of love. How impressive that scene! How filled with a significance beyond words to express. The Master's majestic yet tender figure stood framed in the great circle of flowers which the friends had surrounded him as their parting gifts. How fragrant and beautiful it was, with its atmosphere of a world far removed from that of the sordid material world which encircled us on every side. We slowly passed in front of him. To each he gave a handful of flowers, bestowing the last of the flowers upon the very last friend. To each, Abdu'l-Baha spoke a few words of love and encouragement. For a still moment, the ship was a silent island as the friends looked longingly for the last time upon that wonderful face. The quiet rapture of that moment was shattered by a cry that stabbed every heart. All visitors ashore! No one wanted to be the first to leave. Each one tried to be among the very last to go down the gangplank. The friends gathered on the wharf. They looked up at the figure of their master as the ship slowly moved out into the great river. The sun broke through the clouds like a giant searchlight from heaven, flooding the deck. Abdu'l-Baha stood at the rail. His silvery white hair and beard moved gently in the breeze. His erect, majestic figure was outlined clearly against the sky. Farther and farther he was drawing away from them. Every one of them could feel the pull of his heart towards the ship with its precious cargo. As Abdu'l-Baha moved slowly out of their sight, it seemed to those lonely, heartbroken onlookers as though the sun had ceased to shine and all the birds had stopped their singing. Abdu'l-Baha looked back at that great stone city with its man-made mountains crowding the sky. Who will ever know the thoughts that filled his heart as the ship drew away from America? He, Abdu'l-Baha, after 40 years as a prisoner, had at long last fulfilled the prophecy his father had made so many years before. Baha'u'llah had told him that one day he would raise his voice in the Western world to summon its people to God. Every victory, every unexpected door that opened, Abdu'l-Baha attributed to Baha'u'llah, not to himself. His blessed father had sustained and inspired him at every step along that arduous path. Now it was finished. Finished. Perhaps Abdu'l-Baha's lips moved in a quiet prayer of thanksgiving. God is most glorious. God is most glorious.